There's just 642 too many of them. But my favorite one goes that Gail knows this. So let me introduce, I got a bunch of it's so exciting to me. I have 3 generations of female descendants of Emma Scott Raff here. My Aunt Cess, my cousin Gail, and my niece Sophie. And just by chance. And as Gail will vouch for the fact, as a little boy, I grew up in a family of boys. All my cousins were boys. I was sent off to a boys' boarding school. So I was your classic male chauvinist, whatever. I didn't. So whoever is in charge of the universe has a sense of humor, and she has a very good one. Because when I fall in love and get married, we start to have kids. We have 3 daughters. So we get a dog, the dog's female. We get a budgie, no idea the sex of the budgie until it starts laying eggs. Okay, so keep that thought in mind. The other thought, completely unrelated, is my Uncle Bill, who we love to bits, who wasn't able to come today, was hitting me up on shortly after I bought the Tiger Cats. Would I support Redeemer College? It's a new college in Hamilton. And I go, I know nothing about Redeemer College. I got every single person on the planet, thanks to my success with the little technology company, hitting me up for money. So Uncle Bill, with all due respect, you support Redeemer College. I'll look after NC State. Or something to that effect. So fast forward, fascinating to be here. But the story goes, and this is the point, is my mother, who everyone loved to bits, just a wonderful woman. And she was the most entertaining storyteller you will ever meet. And the reason she was so entertaining is, of course, she never let the truth ever get in the way of a good story. To the point where I remember this vividly like it was yesterday. I was 12 years old. My brother David was 13. Our older brother Michael was 15. And our father sat us down because we had taken to correcting Mom on all her stories. Mom would say, oh, I'm so tired, I had 50 people over for dinner. And we go, no, Mom, you only had 10 people over for dinner. Okay, so Dad sits us down and says, look, everyone loves your mother's story, so you can't keep interrupting like that. And so we would say, but Dad, she's telling lies. Dad would say, no, she's just telling colorful versions of the truth. And so we negotiate. We literally negotiated. My father, being a good businessman, understood a negotiation when he saw one. And we settled on 10 times. So if Mom had 10 guests over for dinner, and she said she had 90 people over for dinner, we could not interrupt. If she claimed to have 110 people over for dinner, we could call her in. Okay, so fast forward. My parents lived a wonderful life. They were married 65 years, just one of the wonderful stories. And they passed away a few years ago. And so we're cleaning out their house up in King. And in the back of Dad's closet are these tins, about 4 of them, with old film in them. And I remember as a younger man asking Dad what were in these films, because I'd seen them before. He says, I don't actually know, because I don't have a projector, but I don't have the heart to throw them away. So here they're now my responsibility. Whatever, however many years my father had been dragging these around, I sure didn't have the heart to throw away my father's films, so I sent them to a service, assuming that there would be nothing on them. They would just be powder in the tins at this point. Shockingly enough, they were not, and then the digitization service was able to digitize them. Turns out they were home movies that my grandfather took in the 1920s. Back in the era of the talkies, he was making home movies. And so they were mostly kids just jumping off the government dock. There was a girl in these movies who everyone who has seen the movie says, hold on, you told us these are 1920s, right? And goes, yeah. So what's Gail doing in the movies? This is Gail and her mother were twins separated at birth. She was the spitting image of her mother at 12. And that's who I grew up with. So when I watched the movies, that was my reaction. Is what's Gail doing? Okay, so we're watching the movies, and there's these movies of Emma Scott Raff and Colonel Naismith paddling a canoe. And I knew this because of my mother's stories. Now, keep in mind, my mother exaggerated every story she ever told me. And she used to tell us the stories of her grandmother and just how important her grandmother was. And her grandmother had founded the most important, with my mother, the most important school the world has ever seen, the Margaret Eaton School. And, this was really, her grandmother was really, really important. And of course, we then deduct the 10 times exaggeration factor. And yeah, her grandmother was a school teacher of some school that no longer exists. But that's as much as I knew. So I put these films up on YouTube after getting them back, and I send a link to all of our fellow cousins around the world. Rather than trying to put passwords and getting people to remember passwords, I just put them up publicly with a little descriptor. David and Nancy's wedding. They had their wedding film in this thing, but also Emma Scott Raff and Colonel Naismith was on one of them. And what do you know? But it was like 3 weeks later after putting them up, I get a call from the TICAT's office saying a professor at Redeemer College wants to know if you're the Bob Young who put films of Emma Scott Raff up on YouTube. That's how does that happen? I don't think I'm related to anyone at Redeemer's. And this was John, who used to challenge his students into paying attention to what the Margaret Eaton School was about, because the story you tell, and I much prefer my version of John's story than John's version of John's story, for the record. I did inherit some of my mother's storytelling. Tendency to be liberal with the truth. Anyway, so John was, the first version you gave me was you were going to do your doctoral thesis on the YWCA movement and the impact the YWCA movement was going to have, it had on women's education between the wars. But it was when you discovered, at least this is how my recollection of it works, that something like 90% of the YWCAs across Canada by 1940 were being run by graduates of the Margaret Eaton School, that he realized, hold on, there's a predecessor to the YWCA that's the player here. And ended up writing the book, so to speak, on the Margaret Eaton School, and the rest is history. But it turns out, so the more I spent time with John on this, the more I came to realize that of all the stories my mother told me growing up, there's exactly one that she did not exaggerate. And in fact, she might have gotten wrong in the other side of it, that her grandmother, Emma Scott Raff, was in fact had a bigger influence on women's education and the place of women in our society than my mother had any idea. And it's very exciting to be part of that. As a dad of 3 daughters, I've moved from being a male chauvinist, whatever, to being a big fan of the whole making sure we maximize the value of everyone in our society, regardless of gender or race or anything else. And Emma Scott Raff is as good a visionary and a positive visionary of making that kind of change. And John, thank you so much for your contribution to bringing the story to life.
Thank you.